George went in and upgraded to another 500. So we're at 1,000 participants now.
Yeah, so I don't think we'll ever need
Yeah.
1,000, but certainly we need 500.
Yeah. I didn't realize, it just slipped through, through my mind completely about this Ponte, because we upgraded in the fall to 1,000, but we should really upgrade permanently to 500.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. Yeah, I think it's probably best to start to give like about 2 minutes after 10 for people to come on. I see according to our schedule, we're supposed to start exactly at 10, but people start coming in, at 10, and then it sort of trickles in over the first 2 minutes. So about 10:02, we'll actually start. I see it's up to 114 already. It's 18 degrees Fahrenheit here in New York.
And Pennsylvania.
Pennsylvania is also 18.
Yes, it was 17 when I got up.
21 in Alexandria. Balmy.
Wow. Okay, so DC area, that's pretty cold.
Let me see what it is in Colorado. 31.
Heat wave.
Somebody in Alberta, Canada has minus 27 Celsius.
Whew. Whew.
Everybody who's on is reporting in their temperatures.
Yeah.
That's great.
And we also have a message from Miss Carla.
Oh, wonderful.
Oh, she's in Brazil now.
This is cool.
Seems like we're getting an international weather report here.
They
Shall we
couldn't hear
begin?
us.
Yeah, I think we should begin.
Welcome, everyone, to the first full day of Buddhist Global Relief's Meeting the New Year with Clarity, Compassion, and Courage online retreat. My name is Patricia Brick. I'm a staff member here at BGR. It's wonderful to see all of your faces here with us today. You're muted on entry because this is a large event, but if you have any questions, please use the chat function and we'll respond. To begin today's session, Patty Price, the Deputy Director of BGR, will share a welcome and introduction to BGR. Patty, welcome.
Thank you. Thank you, Trish. And thank you to Venerable Equal Bodhi and all of you who are joining us today. It's a great honor and joy to welcome the new year with this retreat celebrating the virtues of clarity, compassion, and courage. At Buddhist Global Relief, we embark upon our 14th year of serving people in need around the world, and we are happy to reflect with gratitude on what this organization has become. In 2008, the year that Bhikkhu Bodhi founded BGR, we funded 3 nutritional projects in distant countries. We thought that was a big deal. Our budget was less than $30,000, as I recall. Fast forward to this last year, which was pivotal. We provided grants to support more than 50 projects in 21 countries around the world, including some food security programs right here in the US. All of this thanks to donor-funded grants in excess of $1 million. That's right, we hit the $1 million threshold in grants helping people around the world. So we're truly grateful to reaching this milestone, and yet the unique offerings that BGR brings to the world are more than the sum of the grants that we award. What truly makes BGR unique is the spirit of the Dharma, how it permeates every aspect of our work, both for the board and the staff, as well as the program partners that we choose to fund. In doing this work, our gifts are like a raindrop joining with others to become a river. A small contribution to BGR from any of our supporters is a gift of hope for a young woman in Cambodia funding a scholarship for her education, or for any other individual who has insufficient food to eat. Women who are pregnant and have poor nutrition and need that for themselves and their unborn children. Desperately needed food in Mongolia, Haiti, which we have been working with for years and certainly is in the news, or Cameroon, so on and so on. In this way, Buddhist Global Relief and the Dharma guide us into seeking to transform the material conditions of those who are left behind by unequal societies, both here in the US and in 50 nations. In the 13 years that I served on the board of directors, thanks to the invitation of Bhikkhu Bodhi, I've had the privilege of working with an incredible team that includes board, staff, and extraordinarily dedicated volunteers, and hundreds of others who collectively support Buddhist Global Relief by donating their time, their gifts, and their endorsements. I visited projects here in the US and abroad to report back on firsthand on the work that we have been doing with our partners and to ensure that our gifts truly are transforming lives. Thank you for joining us today in our efforts to reduce suffering of chronic poverty, hunger for tens of thousands of women, children, and families receiving help through our programs in basic education, sustainable agriculture training, and skills training, and human rights endorsements and education to empower and employ vulnerable women. It's a profound honor to do this work and to benefit some of the neediest people in the world, the majority of whom we will never, ever meet, but who will know Buddhist Global Relief thanks to the work that we are doing in their communities. This past week, I transitioned from the board to the staff to assist with our growth in funding, correspondence, and project administration. This is yet an additional honor, and we thank you so much for being with us today as we continue our work and our mission with your help. Thank you.
Thank you for these words, Patty. Now BGR founder and chair, Venerable Bhikkhu Bodhi, will offer us a guided meditation, followed by a talk about clarity in the Dharma. And we'll end with a short period for questions. Bhante.
Okay. Yeah, first, before we start the meditation, I'll just speak a few words about the theme of this retreat. So it occurred to me that it would be good to have a theme in which there are 3 topics, each beginning with the same letter. So for some reason, the words clarity, compassion, and courage came to mind. And it seems that these are 3 qualities that we need as we meet and enter upon the new year. Qualities that will carry us through successfully, that will enable us to fulfill our own aims and aspirations, and also enable us to become a source of benefits for others. And we have 3 monastics who will be speaking on these themes, myself, Aya Dhammadippa, and Reverend, actually 4. One is Jin Chuan and Jin Hui in California. And we didn't consult with each other in advance how we're going to treat these topics. And so we're leaving it very much to the personal inspiration, intuition of each of the speakers to treat these topics in their own way, even to interpret the words in their own way. So I think this will be a sort of creative challenge for each of us, particularly if somebody is speaking on a topic before we go and we want to avoid having just to repeat the same things that they say. Okay, so let us then we'll begin with a short, partly guided meditation. And so let us each take our comfortable and congenial sitting position, whether you're sitting on a mat with the legs crossed, or on a meditation bench, or on a straight back chair. Keep the back straight and upright, but not stiff or rigid. Let the weight of the body be supported by the seat, not by tensing your back muscles. Hands can be placed on the lap, right hand over the left, thumbs lightly touching. Or if you prefer, you can have the hands on the knees or the thighs. Head should be held with the nose perpendicular to the navel. Mouth closed, eyes lightly closed. And begin by settling into the felt sense of the body in the immediate present. You can start off by feeling the pressure of the buttocks against the seat. And then you can move the attention up the torso, up to the shoulders, the neck, the jaw, the upper part of the head, and from there, try to move to a what I call a global sense of the entire body in the immediate present. And to help keep your attention on the body, you can use as a device, a focus device, the word body, body, or sitting, sitting. Let the word occur softly in the background of the mind, but the focus should be on the body in the sitting position, felt experience of the sitting body. Okay, then as you're sitting, you'll notice that the body on its own is breathing. Continuously, incessantly breathing in and out. Now we want to shift our focus to the process of breathing, being attentive to each in-breath, each out-breath, trying to follow the breath as continuously, as consistently as possible. From beginning of the in-breath to the end of the in-breath, from the beginning of the out-breath to the end of the out-breath. If you want, you can settle the attention on a particular area where you feel the breath most clearly. Could be around the nostrils or upper lip. Or it could be with the expansion and contraction of the chest. Or it could be with the rising and falling of the abdomen as you're breathing in and out. So you choose whichever area you prefer. And to help you focus the mind, you can again use a noting device. When breathing in, you can make the light mental note in, in. When breathing out, the light mental note out, out. But again, keeping the noting device in the background, and the center of attention should be the felt experience of the in-breath and the out-breath. Thoughts will arise, naturally they arise, the mind will lose track of the breath. Just let the thoughts come, let them go, and bring the mind back again and again to the in and out breathing. But if you completely lose track of the breath and you find the mind is just wandering among stray thoughts, as soon as you recognize this, you make the mental observation, thinking, thinking, or wandering, wandering. Then don't try to jump right back on the breath, but bring the mind back to the felt experience of the body in the sitting position. Observe the body in the sitting posture until the breath resurfaces, until it manifests again on its own. Then go back to observing the breath. Okay, we'll continue now in silence for about 20 minutes. We're going to end the session now. And so to end, first we take a couple of deep breaths in and out. In and out. And then we rub the palms together to generate some warmth. And then we rub the palms over the face. Top of the head, back of the head, back of the neck. Over to the shoulders. Come down the lower back. Then to the buttocks. If you've been sitting cross-legged, you can massage that area. If you've been sitting cross-legged, you can massage that area to stimulate the circulation. And then down to the knees. And again, if you've been sitting cross-legged, then you can come down to the feet and the toes. Okay, so I'll start the talk now, and this will be the opening theme for our retreat, the opening topic, and that is, I use the word clarity. And as I said, when we opened this session today, that we left the words very much up to the interpretation of the individual speakers. And so I want to sort of investigate the meaning of the word clarity, the way I'm understanding it, and how we apply it in our practice as we enter upon the new year and meet the challenges of the new year. So what is the fundamental meaning of the word clarity? The way I understand it or interpret it, I take it to be clear understanding based on investigation, examination, reflection, and personal insight. And I'm not using the word insight in the technical Buddhist sense of vipassana, but just in the general sense. So we could say that in terms of Buddhist formal doctrines, we could say that clarity corresponds to right view. But again, I'm not using it in that narrow, specific technical sense. But the word clarity suggests, at least in my thinking, the absence of obstructions to understanding, the absence of hindrances to understanding. It suggests, it has the nuance of penetration to the real situation in which we find ourselves. The word clarity also suggests absence of darkness. So the darkness is what prevents us from seeing things clearly, and to gain clarity is to dispel that darkness, to be able to see clearly. So some of the things in ordinary life that obstruct our vision might be, for example, when we're walking in a mist or a fog, we've had a lot of days like that this past week, then one can see clearly. In fact, just a little anecdote, this past week, after breakfast, I was walking down from the dining hall back to the building where I live, and the fog was so thick that I was thinking that this is the kind of weather where you see a vampire emerge out of the mist. And just as I had that thought, a figure appeared through the fog. I got startled for a moment, thinking my thought has come true. But then I looked again, and it was one of the nuns who lives here doing a walk in a circle around a rapid walk around the parking lot. But for a moment in that mist, I didn't see clearly. And so I thought my fear of a vampire has come true. Okay, so a mist or a fog is something that obscures vision. The mist in the midst of smoke, if we're in a smoky room, we can't see clearly. If we have a visual defect, we can't see clearly. So clarity implies the absence of darkness, the absence of a mist over the mind, the absence of a mental fog, the absence of cloudiness of mind, the absence of a visual defect in the mind's inner vision. Okay, clarity, again, the way I understand it, also suggests brightness, light, illumination. When things are dark, we can't see clearly. And so in order to see clearly in a dark room, we'll turn on the light, or if it's daytime, we'll open the curtains, and that enables us to see clearly. Now, lack of clarity, I would see as having two aspects. Lack of mental clarity. One is, call this confusion in one's understanding and thinking, or the lack of knowledge, lack of insight, lack of investigation. And so when one doesn't investigate, examine things, when one thinks in a confused way, in an unclear way, then the mind is covered by this darkness, this kind of obscurity. And in that case, one lacks clarity. But there's another kind of lack of clarity, and that is the kind that's induced or produced by external agencies, by external agents. It's the distorted understanding, a kind of inverted understanding of the way things really are. And this distorted understanding often in today's world stems from our exposure to various sources of so-called information, which actually distort, misrepresent the true nature of things. So we're constantly being bombarded through especially the various media channels available through the internet or television, which I don't get to watch myself, but through the internet, sources of misinformation and disinformation, which induce this kind of inverted, distorted understanding of the way things actually are. And so we even have such expressions nowadays as alternative facts. So when the facts are inconvenient, when the facts run against the grain of our own biases and dispositions and wishes, our own preferences, then we can buy into an alternative set of facts, which will help us which we believe can help us adjust to the situation that conflicts with our desires and our own dispositions. Okay, so to counteract lack of clarity, we need a clear understanding, which should be based on having first access to reliable sources of information, based on examination. Sometimes to understand our situation, we have to expose ourselves to a variety of points of view and then be able to distinguish between them, to discern amongst them. So we could say that clarity here, when it's properly developed, turns into discernment, the ability to distinguish truth and falsehood, the ability to distinguish what is real from what is false, the ability to see where we are being exposed to the real situation, to actual facts, and where we are being subtly sometimes deceived, misled, or now they have the expression gaslighted. Okay, I want to apply this idea of clarity to 3 areas of our life. The 3 areas will be the understanding of our own minds, the understanding of our social conditions, the community conditions in which we're living, and the understanding of the Dharma. I have to deal with these briefly, but I'll try to illuminate the way clarity applies in each of these areas. So the first area is the understanding of our own mind. So this is a very crucial principle in practicing Buddhism, since the Buddha teaches, if you know the Dhammapada, that all Dhammas arise from the mind, that the mind is the starting point that determines the condition of our lives. And so the Buddha divides the qualities of the mind, the states of mind, into 2 broad classes, which he calls the unwholesome states, which are harmful to ourselves and potentially harmful to others, and the wholesome, the states that are beneficial to ourselves and potentially beneficial to others. And the mind, according to the Buddha's teaching, is constantly changing. It's not one fixed entity with a substantial nature of its own. But in our minds, there's a constant interplay, alternation of wholesome factors and unwholesome factors. And the task in our Buddhist practice is to overcome, to weaken and eventually overcome the unwholesome factors, and then to generate, strengthen, and perfect the wholesome dispositions or factors of the mind. So to gain clarity from this angle means that we gain a clear understanding of the workings of our own mind. And this is one of the actually benefits that come from meditation, and particularly from the type of meditation in which we don't have a fixed topic of reflection, but we open the mind to let the contents of the mind rise to the surface. This happens often when we're doing the mindfulness of breathing, which acts as a kind of clear, colorless background against which our thought patterns can become manifest. And so as we continue with this practice, the different dispositions and tendencies and habitual ways of thinking, the emotional dispositions, the intentions, purposes, aims that often remain in obscurity that often remain hidden beneath the surface, unrecognized by us, but still operating in the background, sort of governing our lives, conditioning the way we think about ourselves, the way we relate to other people, the way we respond to different situations we face in life. Those factors still operate in the background. And so as we proceed with the practice of this kind of formless meditation, the workings of the mind become clearer and clearer, enabling us to start to transform the mind. So sometimes we could speak about the stages in the development of mindfulness as moving from understanding the mind to shaping or transforming the mind, and then third, liberating the mind. But we have to start with the understanding of the mind, and that is where clarity becomes prominent, to become clear about the nature of one's own mind. And to help us understand the nature of the mind, the Buddha gives us various, we call this kind of maps of the unwholesome states of mind that we have to eliminate, and also maps of the wholesome states that we have to develop. Here I'm going to be focusing on the unwholesome states, which we call in Pali kilesa or upakilesa, the defilements of the mind. And there are various schemes of defilements laid out in different suttas, but a scheme that I found particularly useful is one laid out in the discourse on the simile of the cloth. It's in the Majjhima Nikaya, Sutta number 7. Here the Buddha enumerates 16 defilements of the mind. And I've sort of compressed this list a little bit to make it maybe more wieldy for our ordinary usage. So I've taken about 8 factors of the mind that are to be dealt with. So we have greed, anger, envy, which can veer off into jealousy, miserliness or stinginess, then hypocrisy, that is the tendency to cover up our faults so that others don't find out about them, or to present ourselves as having good qualities that we don't really have, to gain admiration from others. Then stubbornness, the insistence that our point of view is right and other points of view are wrong, or a resentment of criticism from others. Then competitiveness, the idea that we are competing against others to become number one, to become the top, the best. Then comes arrogance, thinking we are superior, and then looking down upon others with contempt and treating them with contempt. And vanity, priding ourselves on our virtues and good qualities. Okay, so this is a kind of map of some of the defilements of the mind. And we, in striving for clarity, we aim to get clear about what kind of thoughts are arising in the mind. And when these thoughts arise, what we do is to designate them, not let them slip away in disguise, but we clearly and specifically designate them, label them, and thereby we recognize them and make the effort to remove them. And to remove them, the Buddha teaches, again, many different methods of mental training, but even simply the method of mindfully recognizing the unwholesome states on its own creates a kind of resistance to them, and on its own, it sort of debilitates, weakens those unwholesome states so that they can't operate as forcefully as they usually do. Like these unwholesome states gain their power from being unacknowledged, unrecognized, operating in the background. And so when we put the spotlight on them by recognizing them clearly, by identifying them, then they lose their power, they lose their grip. And by doing this persistently and patiently over long periods of time, they grow weaker and weaker, creating space for the wholesome factors of mind to arise and gain in strength. Okay, so this is briefly applying clarity to the understanding of our own minds. But we don't live, each of us, we don't live sort of sealed up, isolated from the greater society and world in which we're living, but we are inextricably bound up in communities, societies, nations, and the global world community. So now I want to speak a little bit about clarity in regard to what I call the bigger picture, by focusing on some of the shared human problems that we're facing today, the major problems which are challenging, I would say, even perhaps the survival of humankind today, or which are at least endangering a safe, secure, and free future for human beings today. The first of these, which is, of course, known to everybody, and which is now very much in the center of attention, is the COVID pandemic. And this is an area where there is a lot of lack of clarity, a lot of confusion, bewilderment, and distorted understanding or misunderstanding because of a barrage, a flood of misinformation, disinformation, which is being broadcast throughout the internet, social media, different websites. So when the COVID first arrived in our midst, rather than address it directly and recognize the danger posed by this illness, we were told that it's going to disappear on its own, that it would clear up. And when we went into lockdown modes, there were rebellions against the lockdown conditions, even attacks on some of the state capitals to end the lockdown conditions, and people defying the advice of the medical community, initially refusing to wear masks, refusing to observe social distancing, physical distancing. And now that the vaccine has become available, even though now I think 80% of the US population finally has gotten at least one vaccination, but it took so long, with large blocks of the country refusing to get vaccinated on the most specious grounds, on the basis of false information. And accepting that false information shows lack of clarity. And so if we have clear thinking, we will observe the advice. We will first look into, try to find out what is the advice coming from reliable sources, from the Center for Disease Control, the World Health Organization, and we'll observe those protocols to prevent the spread of the virus. And also an area where we need a kind of collective conscience is to push for the distribution of the vaccine across the world. Because we're facing this terrible global vaccine inequity, whereby those in the wealthy countries, in the northern countries, have access to the vaccine, and yet so many reject it, refuse to get the vaccine, while in the so-called developing world, or I call it the traditional world, the traditional countries, billions of people are crying out for the vaccine. And so this is where we have to push for a global distribution of the vaccine formulas so that qualified pharmaceutical companies in other countries can manufacture the vaccine. In fact, just this past week, I learned that that has taken place through the collaboration of the Texas Children's Hospital in Houston and the Baylor University College of Medicine collaborated in creating a vaccine, and they're sending the formula for that vaccine to pharmaceutical companies around the world, so far to India, Indonesia, and Botswana. And they're not expecting any returns, the teams in Texas, with no returns at all, just freely distributing the formula for the vaccine. I expected it this week to make banner headlines, but one hardly saw it on any news sites. I had to go to alternative news sites to see that news. Okay, so one of our collective problems is the COVID pandemic, which is probably foremost in everybody's mind right now, because we want to avoid exposing ourselves to and letting our loved ones be exposed to the virus. But the prominence given to the COVID pandemic has pushed into the background another crisis, collective crisis that we're following, which is likely to have much more severe long-range consequences. And that is climate change, on which I'm not going to elaborate since there's plenty of information about it. But as climate change becomes more and more intense, so we're seeing more and more strange, bizarre weather events, wildfires sweeping over the West Coast from Los Angeles to Northern California to Oregon, Washington State, more ferocious floods, droughts, heat waves. This becomes, again, a severe problem that we have to face collectively, using all of the means at our disposal, aligning ourselves with some of the organizations that are putting pressure on the politicians to do something to address climate change and to address it with the rapidity, with the urgency that it truly demands. So that's an area where we need clarity, especially to see through the misinformation and disinformation, and also clarity to dispel indifference, apathy, or a kind of passive resignation to the flow of events. Instead, we have to take the initiative ourselves to take responsibility, to contribute what we can, our own voice, to address this problem and secure a viable future for humankind. And then a third problem, and I'm going to speak frankly about this now. This is an area where I see very few monastics speak, but I don't have any hesitation about speaking about this, even though it borders on politics. But it is what's taking place in this country and elsewhere around the world is a creeping authoritarianism in government, which is leading to autocracy, which has the danger of resulting in the triumph of an autocratic system of governance. And the way this is manifesting in this country, just a couple of days ago, we had the anniversary of the attack on the Capitol, the January 6th attack on the Capitol. But the more dangerous subversion of democracy in this country is not coming from the rioters who attack buildings, but it's coming in a slow, gradual way, almost imperceptible unless one is clearly paying attention. It's occurring in the undermining of our system of elections, so that voting laws, new voting laws are being adopted that are restricting and limiting the ability to vote, more stringent requirements for people to vote. Laws are being enacted giving license to poll watchers who will be coming from a particular party to watch voters at the poll and intimidate them in the process of voting. And then laws are being passed as well to shift the responsibility for elections from unbiased, impartial, nonpartisan election officials to a new batch of election officials who will have the ability, the authority to throw the election over to the candidate of their choice if they're not satisfied with the outcome of the election. And so this is a matter on which we have to have clear understanding, because if we and be willing to take action to resist this tendency, because if we don't stop this tendency, stop it fully in its tracks before it continues to gain more momentum, we're going to lose what we in America pride ourselves on, our democratic system of government. So those are just a few of the factors in the bigger picture about which we need clarity. And then the third area in which I was going to speak about clarity is clarity in our understanding of the Dharma. And here I want to I'm not going to give a full Dharma discourse here, but just bring in one principle, one teaching of the Dharma that helps us navigate our way through the difficulties and challenges we face, whether in this year or in the years ahead of us in the future. And this is the principle of what's called the three lakkhana, the three marks of existence: impermanence, unsatisfactoriness, and non-self. And of these three, the one that I find maybe most helpful in facing all of the challenges that we meet is the principle of non-self, that at the core of our being, there is no substantial I, which is the lasting subject of experience, the agent of our action. But what we call myself, my person, is this interplay of ever-changing bodily and mental factors. And yet through the work of delusion or ignorance, the mind fabricates the idea of a self, and that idea of self becomes invested with so much emotional energy. It becomes the source of our attachments and aversions, our likes and dislikes. And so when things meet the wishes of that stipulated self, we feel happy and joyful. When things go contrary to our expectations, we become dejected. And so one way to sort of overcome the swinging of the mind back and forth between upliftment and dejection, joy and sorrow, being sensitive to praise and blame, to honor, dishonor, is always to reflect on the teaching of non-self, that this is not mine, this I am not, this is not myself. One doesn't need deep insight to be able to utilize this teaching, but if one does a regular reflection as part of one's meditation, one could do it even at the end of one's meditation session, just go through if you like, the five aggregates. The body is not mine, not I, not myself. The feelings, perceptions, volitional activities, consciousness, not mine, not I, not myself. Over time, you find that this weakens the grasping or clinging to the notions of I, mine, and self, and gives greater freedom in one's daily life, even in ordinary life. Okay, maybe this will do for my overview of clarity. And I think we have some time. Maybe we can devote about 10 minutes to questions. And I think maybe Tricia will explain how people can pose their questions.
Not I.
Okay, maybe.
Yvonne?
Okay, the way we do it in my class, let's see. At the bottom of the Zoom window, there's something called reactions. Do we have the raised hand there? Yeah, there's one of the options is to raise the hand. So if you want to ask a question, you click raise hand, and then a little hand symbol will appear. Well, I'm not seeing any hands. Or if you find it difficult to use that, I think you could use the chat box if you want to pose a question.
And they also, so far, no question.
Okay.
Okay, we have one.
Okay, I see one from Mary Jane McCowan. Oh, okay. Now the way you ask the question, you would unmute yourself. Yeah, you have to.
I got it. So what I wonder, these are any one of those community issues that we need clarity for, any one of them could overwhelm a person.
Yeah.
And so then I guess the question is how to not be overwhelmed and how to not be fatalistic. And the part about clearing away apathy. Anyway, all that is how to keep going and not just sort of hole up, because holding up isn't going to help, although it might keep you from being overwhelmed for a little bit.
Yeah, I could understand that each of these issues is overwhelming. And first I would say that this is where maybe one of the benefits of the practice of meditation becomes useful. Since when we do the meditation, it's a way of strengthening the wholesome factors of the mind so that we can face these issues. We have an understanding of them. We can recognize the dangers that they pose, the threats to human well-being, whether our own or that of those who are close to us. So we recognize them clearly, but through this practice of training the mind in meditation, we gain greater skill in maintaining our equanimity in the face of these challenges. And equanimity is not the same as apathy. Apathy means you don't care. You're not willing to invest the time to investigate a particular issue. But equanimity means you have an understanding of the issue and you have concern, a compassionate concern for the issue, but the mind is not overwhelmed, does not become paralyzed, does not become sort of obstructed or blocked, but one could investigate the issue to see where one might contribute to resolve the particular problem, at least where one can contribute your own voice, even if in a small way, because it's when many small voices come together that we can get a large thundering voice that can make its impact on the public consciousness. And I think we can't expect personally to address all of the issues together, but we have to find the particular issue that resonates with us, that awakens our own sense of conscience and commitment, and then make our contribution in that area.
Thank you.
Okay, now I see you've paved the way for some other people to put up their hands. And so the next will be Sean in Massachusetts. Then you unmute.
Good morning, Bhante. Thank you for your talk. I just want to say there's a couple of places where I feel that I can plug in. I was very also grateful for you addressing the issue of authoritarianism and fascism and the threat to democracy. I've been following the Milk Tea Alliance in South and Southeast Asia, and throughout all our Buddhist brothers and sisters in Southeast Asia are fighting for democracy and human rights.
Yeah.
The whole region, dozens of countries are involved, and
Yeah.
I feel totally aligned with them. I've been supporting their movement, but based on what you were saying today, I'm thinking like, well, maybe we need something like a Milk Tea Alliance here in the United States. Our Buddhist brothers and sisters in the United States can get together and be part of the Milk Tea Alliance and insist and go to protect democracy here in the United States.
Yeah, though I think the Buddhist population in the US is probably relatively small, but what I think is necessary for Buddhists to align themselves, to connect to some of the larger organizations that are working to try to protect democracy and prevent it from being, undermined in the ways that I mentioned. Perhaps there are Buddhist groups already. In fact, Alan Sinauki at the Berkeley Zen Center, in the past, he's been very active in attempts to mobilize people to vote in elections. Perhaps he has organized some group to sort of combat this tendency towards what I call towards authoritarianism and the subversion of the electoral system. But the places where it's most serious, of course, are in some of the southern states and Michigan, Wisconsin, Pennsylvania, also in the crosshairs. Okay, we can move on to, I'll have to look into the Milk Tea Alliance. I didn't hear that expression before. It seems to be the answer to the US Tea Party that flourished in about 2012. Okay, Patrick. No, I don't see any.
Okay.
Okay.
Hi,
Yeah.
Hey, Bhante, for a long time, I've wanted to first thank you for doing as the Buddha asked and making the Dhamma available in our native tongue, English, with your translations of the Majjhima Nikaya, Anguttara Nikaya, Samyutta Nikaya. I'm so grateful. But the question I had is, there happened to be a op-ed piece by Jimmy Carter in the New York Times just a few days ago with exactly what you were talking about the outback. But how can, since I would think normally the monastics shy away from politics, so how can the monastics work to correct the situation in your view?
Yeah, I think it's inappropriate for a monastic to sort of throw their support to it, like endorse particular candidates or to campaign on behalf of candidates, or to run in elections themselves. Even though when I was in Sri Lanka, there was a political party made up of monks who actually had monks elected to parliament, and monks were serving in parliament, which seemed to me not proper at all. But the way I would see that's appropriate for a monastic is to encourage people, as I said, to link up with broader movements to ensure movements that are intended to safeguard, to guarantee electoral integrity. Or it could be any of the other issues with movements, with organizations that are dealing with addressing climate change, for example, or racial justice, or economic justice. In fact, I would say that this is an essential part of what I would say of promoting the common good, the good of the country, the good of humanity. Because what I sometimes say is that people think of politics as being a dirty realm where people are just contending for power and for the aggrandizement of their own ego. But I say that the political field is a field where great moral conflicts are playing out, great moral struggles between securing the well-being of people and some other forces aiming to suppress people, to undermine the well-being of people. It's where issues of war and peace are decided, whether we're going to take action against climate change or to allow the fossil fuel companies to continue to promote the use of fossil fuels, whether there's going to be racial justice or continued discrimination and exclusion, whether there's going to be economic justice or whether large parts of the population will have to live in poverty. So those are great moral issues, and the political field is where those issues get decided. So as a monastic, I don't participate directly and I don't endorse candidates, but I say that these are the issues that we have to pay attention to as an expression of our moral conscience. Okay, I think we'll have to end the session here because I will have to go up now for the meal.
Thank you for these teachings, Bhante.
And we come back.
The next session will begin at 3 p.m. Eastern Time, noon Pacific. We're going to end this session now, but we'll be back on right around at 3 p.m. Eastern, noon Pacific. Thank you, everyone.
Okay, so thank you.
Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu. Thank you.
Sadhu, sadhu.
Okay,
Thank
so
you,
thank you.
Bhante Bodhi.
so much.
Okay,
Thank you all,
Thank you.
Venerable.
Thank
Thank you, BG Asma.
Thank you, Bhante.
Thank you, Bhante. Sadhu, sadhu.
Thank
Thank you,
you.
Bhante.
Happy New
So good to
Year.
see you, Bhante.
Thank you, Patricia, for getting me the information. Thank you, Bhante.
Off කරන්න තියන්න ඕනද?
Bye bye, everybody. See you in a while.